Episode 5, The Last Primarch. The Emperor had always planned for failure, not because he expected defeat, not because he doubted his vision, but because he understood a truth that few others ever grasped. The future could not be controlled, only prepared for. Across countless possible futures, humanity triumphed. Across countless others, it perished. The Emperor had spent his life navigating between those outcomes, building safeguards, creating contingencies, preparing for disasters no one else could imagine. Some were known, many were forgotten, and some remained hidden for 10,000 years, waiting. Deep beneath the Imperial Palace, ancient mechanisms stirred. Dust fell from stone ceilings untouched since the Great Crusade. Forgotten reactors awakened. Power surged through circuits older than most civilizations. Warning runes ignited one by one. Systems long considered dormant came alive. The custodes responded immediately. Entire shield companies descended into the depths of the palace. Their orders were simple: identify the disturbance, secure the source, eliminate any threat. None of them expected what they would find. The chamber lay beneath levels of the palace that no living imperial official knew existed. Even among the custodes, knowledge of its existence had vanished. Its corridors were sealed by technologies older than the Imperium itself. Gene locks, psychic wards, mechanisms crafted by the Emperor's own hand. Every barrier opened automatically as the custodes approached, as though the palace itself wanted them to enter. That alone was disturbing. The Imperial Palace did nothing accidentally. Eventually, they reached the final vault, a colossal adamantium door covered in ancient Terran script. Many of the symbols predated the Imperium. Some predated recorded human history. At the center stood a single inscription, 3 words: Sigma Primus Protocol. No one present understood their meaning, yet every custodian instinctively recognized their importance, because beneath the inscription was another mark, the personal sigil of the Emperor himself. Word reached the High Lords within hours. Word reached Mars shortly afterward. Most importantly, word reached Robert Guilliman. The Lord Commander of the Imperium arrived on Terra less than 2 days later. He entered the chamber, accompanied by custodes, Mechanicus representatives, and members of the Inquisition. None spoke. The atmosphere felt wrong, heavy, ancient, as though history itself had been waiting for this moment. Guilliman studied the vault for several minutes. The script, the machinery, the sigils. Then his expression changed. For the first time since entering the chamber, he appeared genuinely surprised, because he recognized the craftsmanship, not the chamber itself, the hand that built it, the Emperor, personally. That realization unsettled him more than anything else, because there were very few things his father ever concealed from the Primarchs, and whatever rested behind this door had been hidden from all of them. Even Malcador, even Dorn, even Horus, perhaps from everyone. The vault opened slowly. Ancient gears groaned. Massive locking mechanisms disengaged. Centuries of dust scattered across the floor. Then the darkness beyond became visible. A single chamber, simple, empty, except for one object, a stasis field. The room fell silent. Tech priests immediately began scanning the structure. Their instruments returned impossible readings. The technology didn't resemble any known Imperial design. It was older, far older, perhaps dating back to the earliest years of the Great Crusade, perhaps earlier still. At its center stood a figure, motionless, frozen in time. Even through the stasis distortion, one fact was immediately obvious. The figure was enormous, far larger than any ordinary human, larger than an Astartes, broad-shouldered, armoured, a giant. The custodes exchanged glances. The realization spread rapidly through the chamber. Nobody dared speak it aloud, not yet, because the possibility seemed absurd, impossible, and yet there were very few beings in existence of that size. The stasis field began to weaken. Energy levels dropped steadily. Systems disengaged one by one. The chamber filled with ancient mechanical sounds. A process that had been waiting 10,000 years was finally completing. Guilliman stepped forward, his expression unreadable. Yet those closest to him sensed tension, not fear, something rarer, uncertainty, because for the first time in millennia, he genuinely didn't know what was about to happen. The stasis field vanished. Silence, absolute silence. For several seconds, nothing happened. The giant remained motionless, frozen, still. Then a hand moved. Several custodes immediately raised their guardian spears. The Mechanicus delegation stepped backward. Weapon systems activated throughout the chamber. No one knew what they were witnessing. No one knew whether it represented salvation or catastrophe. The giant slowly opened his eyes, golden, ancient, focused. The eyes of a Primarch. The room froze. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The impossible had become reality. A son of the Emperor stood before them, alive. The giant looked around the chamber, studying unfamiliar faces, ancient machinery, strange architecture. His gaze eventually settled upon Guilliman. For several moments, neither Primarch spoke. 10,000 years of history stood between them. 10,000 years of war, loss, failure, and survival. Finally, the giant spoke. His voice was calm, measured, unchanged by time. Robot. Guilliman stared. For perhaps the first time in centuries, the Lord Commander appeared almost human, almost vulnerable. Then he answered, "Brother." The giant stepped forward. The chamber trembled beneath his weight. Every eye remained fixed upon him, because now there could be no doubt, no uncertainty, no possibility of mistake. Rogal Dorn had returned, the Praetorian of terror, the defender of the Imperial Palace, the architect of humanity's greatest fortifications, the last son many believed dead, returned, and somewhere far beyond the galaxy. The Great Devourer continued its advance. For several moments neither Primarch spoke. The chamber remained silent. Custodes, tech priests, inquisitors, all stood motionless, witnessing something few believed they would ever see. Two sons of the Emperor standing together once more. The Age of Legends had returned, if only for a moment. Rogal Dorn studied Guilliman carefully. Time had changed him. Not physically, Primarchs did not age as ordinary men did, but something else had changed, something deeper, a weight, an exhaustion, a burden carried for far too long. Dorn recognized it immediately, because he knew exactly what could create such a look: responsibility. Finally he spoke. "How long?" Guilliman understood instantly. Not how long had Dorn slept, not how long since the heresy, not how long since the Emperor's ascension. How long had humanity been fighting alone? 10,000 years, right? Dorn said nothing, but several observers noticed his jaw tighten, a tiny reaction, barely visible, yet for Rogal Dorn, it was the equivalent of open grief. 10,000 years, the number itself was almost incomprehensible. 10,000 years since Terra burned. 10,000 years since Horus died. 10,000 years since their father had been entombed upon the Golden Throne. An empire that was never supposed to survive 1,000 had somehow endured 10 times longer. "Take me to him." Nobody questioned the request. Hours later, Rogal Dorn stood before the Golden Throne for the first time in 10 millennia. No narration could truly describe the moment. No historian could adequately record it. The Praetorian had returned to the palace he once defended, only to find it transformed into a mausoleum. The Emperor still sat upon the throne, radiant, broken, alive, dead. A contradiction sustained by faith and machinery. Dorn stared silently. Minutes passed. Then more. No one interrupted. No one dared. Eventually Guilliman spoke. "We have done what we could." Still, Dorn did not answer. His eyes remained fixed upon the throne, upon the father he had failed, upon the dream that had become a nightmare. Finally he turned away, and for the first time since awakening, he looked tired. Not physically, spiritually, because Rogal Dorn understood fortifications. He understood defense. He understood endurance. But even he had never imagined defending a corpse for 10,000 years. The following days were spent bringing him up to date. History, wars, the Age of Apostasy, the Beast, the Great Rift, the Indomitus Crusade, the return of Guilliman, the fall of Cadia, the opening of the Cicatrix Maledictum. Each revelation was another wound, each disaster another failure, each loss another reminder of what humanity had become. Yet throughout it all, Dorn remained silent, listening, observing, learning. Only when the Tyranids were mentioned did his expression change. Guilliman noticed immediately, because unlike the others, Dorn asked questions, specific questions, detailed questions. How many worlds lost? How many fleets destroyed? How many confirmed contacts? How much biomass observed? What are the growth projections? The questions continued for hours. Eventually, the reports from Explorator Fleet Vesta 9 were presented. The dead galaxy, the shadow in the warp, the psychic catastrophes, the listening station, the impossible calculations. Dorn reviewed every document personally, every report, every sensor recording, every testimony. The room remained silent as he worked. Some hours passed, then an entire day. When he finally finished, the Primarch closed the final data slate and said nothing. For nearly 5 minutes, no one dared interrupt. Because everyone present understood something unusual was happening. Rogal Dorn was thinking, not about battle, not about tactics, not about victory, about survival. Finally, he looked up. "What is your current strategic assessment?" The question was directed toward a senior Lord Militant. The officer immediately answered, "We believe the Imperium can slow the invasion." Dorn nodded. "Continue." The officer swallowed. "We believe key sectors can be fortified." Another nod. "We believe losses can be managed." Silence. The Primarch stared at him. The officer's confidence vanished instantly because he suddenly realized he was speaking to perhaps the greatest defensive strategist in human history, a being who had defended Terra itself, a being who had fought wars while entire civilizations were collapsing around him. Finally, Dorn asked a single question. Can humanity win? The room fell silent. No one answered, because everyone already knew the truth. The projections from Mars, the dead galaxy, the listening station, the shadow in the warp, every piece of evidence pointed toward the same conclusion. Humanity could survive battles, perhaps campaigns, or possibly entire decades, but eventually the swarm would arrive, and when it did, nothing the Imperium possessed could stop it. The silence stretched. Then Dorn spoke. His voice was calm, cold, certain. "Then we are not discussing victory." The words struck the room like artillery fire. "We are discussing extinction." No one argued, no one could. Because for the first time, someone had spoken the truth aloud. The Imperium was not preparing for war. The Imperium was preparing for annihilation. Several hours later, Guilliman and Dorn met alone, high above Terra, within a chamber overlooking the endless spires of the Imperial Palace. For a time, neither spoke, watching the lights of humanity's capital flicker beneath them. Eventually, Guilliman broke the silence. "I never expected to see you again." Dorn allowed himself the faintest smile. "Neither did I." Another silence. Older this time, more familiar, the silence of brothers. Finally, Guilliman looked toward him. "You look old." Dorn actually laughed, a rare sound, one almost forgotten by history. "So do you." For the first time in centuries, Guilliman smiled, only briefly, but genuinely. The moment passed quickly. Reality returned, the Tyranids, the galaxy, the end approaching. Guilliman's expression hardened. "You've seen the reports?" Dorn nodded. "I have. And?" Dorn looked out across Terra, across the endless city, across the civilization he once helped build. Then he delivered the conclusion that would reshape the Imperium. "We cannot do this alone." Guilliman already knew the answer, yet hearing Dorn say it aloud carried weight. Because if Rogal Dorn believed humanity could not survive, the situation was truly desperate. Then Dorn continued, "We will require the others." The room fell silent. Guilliman understood immediately. Not armies, not fleets, not weapons. Primarchs. The order was given less legends. 24 hours later, deep for the first time since the Horus heresy, the Imperium would begin a coordinated search echoed for the missing sons of the forests. The command originated from Terra itself. Heard the call, signed jointly by Robout Guilliman and Rogal Dorn. The document was brief, direct, without ambiguity. Locate every surviving Primarch, no matter the cost. Across the Imperium, entire agencies were mobilized. The Inquisition, the Adeptus Custodes, the Officio Assassinorum, the Adeptus Mechanicus, even the Navigator houses. Resources normally reserved for sector-wide crusades were redirected toward a single purpose: finding legends. Most Imperial citizens never learned the truth. They only saw fleets moving, astropaths transmitting unusual messages, ancient archives being opened, forgotten records suddenly becoming valuable. The galaxy was searching for ghosts, because somewhere in the darkness, the Emperor's remaining sons still lived, or at least the Imperium hoped they did. The first target was obvious: Vulkan, the perpetual, the immortal, the son who could not truly die. For 10,000 years, rumours had surfaced across the galaxy. Stories of a giant warrior appearing during moments of catastrophe, saving entire populations, then vanishing, always vanishing. Many dismissed the tales as myths. Dorn did not. "Find him," that was all he said. The second target was Corvus Corax. That search terrified even the Inquisition, because the stories surrounding Corax had become increasingly disturbing over the millennia. Reports spoke of shadows moving through the warp, nightmarish creatures torn apart by unseen claws, word-bearers found dead in impossible circumstances, whispers of a dark figure hunting traitors through eternity. Some believed Corax had become something else, something no longer entirely human, something touched by the warp. Dorn reviewed the reports personally, then reached a conclusion. Whatever he has become, a pause, then he remains my brother. The search continued. Jagatai Khan, the Great Khan, lost within the webway, pursuing enemies beyond human understanding. Entire expeditions had disappeared, attempting to locate him. Yet now the search resumed, because humanity no longer had the luxury of accepting failure. Every Primarch mattered, every legend mattered, Every weapon mattered, because the Great Devourer was coming. Days later, Guilliman and Dorn descended once more into the ancient vault beneath the Imperial Palace, not because of the stasis chamber, because of what had been discovered beside it. A second vault, smaller, older, hidden. This chamber contained no warriors, no weapons, no machines, only records, ancient records, the personal journals of the Emperor. Even Guilliman stared in disbelief. Many believed such documents did not exist. Others believed they'd been destroyed during the heresy. Yet here they were, preserved for 10,000 years. Waiting, the Primarchs spent days examining them. Most contained fragments, observations, research notes, half-completed theories, and then they found something extraordinary. References to deep space surveys conducted before the Great Crusade, long before humanity spread across the stars, long before the Primarchs were created. The Emperor had been searching the darkness, not for enemies within the galaxy, beyond it. The realization sent a chill through everyone present because it meant one thing. The Pharaoh's signal had not been the first warning. The Emperor had known something existed out there. Not Tyranids specifically, not the Hive Mind, but something. Ancient survey vessels had discovered impossible void regions, dead stars, unexplained absences, areas where life should have existed, yet did not. Entire sections of the journals focused on a recurring question. What could remove life on such a scale? No answer appeared. Even the Emperor had failed to solve the mystery. One final note appeared near the end of the collection, written in the Emperor's own hand. If the darkness beyond the stars ever begins to move, humanity must stand together or perish separately. Neither Primarch spoke for several minutes, because those words felt less like a warning and more like a prophecy. Far beyond terror, the search continued. Signals crossed the galaxy. Agents disappeared into unexplored regions. Ancient clues were uncovered. Forgotten legends investigated, and slowly, results began to emerge. The Salamander's strike force discovered evidence that one of Vulkan's hidden sanctuaries had recently been occupied. A navigator house reported strange warp disturbances, matching descriptions associated with Corax. Within the webway, Harlequin messengers hinted that the Khan might still be alive. The impossible was becoming possible. Hope was returning, yet hope arrived alongside fear, because every passing day brought fresh reports from the galactic rim, fresh evidence of the approaching swarm, fresh proof that time was running out. Then came the howl. It began with navigators. Several simultaneously reported hearing something inside the warp. Not a voice, not a psychic message, a howl, ancient, wild, familiar. The reports spread quickly. Soon astropaths reported similar experiences, then sanctioned psychers, then even ordinary humans aboard warp-capable vessels. The sound lasted only moments, yet everyone described it the same way. A wolf's howl. Dorn received the reports personally. He read them once, then handed them to Guilliman for the first time in weeks. But the Praetorian smiled. He's heard, Guilliman nodded, because there was only one being in existence capable of creating such a reaction. Only one Primarch whose presence could echo through the warp itself. Leman Russ, the Wolf King, and somewhere deep within the Imperium, beyond mortal sight, beyond Imperial reach, a lone figure walked through impossible forests. The trees stretched toward infinity. Their roots wound through dimensions. Their branches touched distant realities. The figure had wandered there for 10,000 years, searching, hunting, waiting, a giant clad in worn armor, ancient, scarred, unbroken, Leman Russ stopped. For the first time in centuries, he listened. Across impossible distances, he felt it. The shadow in the warp, the hunger, the approaching darkness. Then he felt something else. His brothers, one awakened, one calling, one waiting. Russ looked toward a sky that did not truly exist and smiled, not because he was happy, because the waiting was finally over. At last, the hunt had begun. Across the galaxy, old legends stirred. Ancient warriors opened their eyes. Forgotten oaths awakened. Brothers long separated by time and tragedy began their journey home, because the end was coming, and humanity would need every son of the Emperor it could find. Far beyond the Milky Way, far beyond the dead galaxies, deep within the heart of the Tyranid migration, the swarm parts, bioships the size of continents drift aside. Living fortresses move from the path. Entire ecosystems rearrange themselves. Something emerges, a construct so vast that nearby bioships resemble insects. A living moon, perhaps larger. Its surface writhes with countless organisms. Its shadow stretches across millions of kilometers. At its center, a single enormous eye opens. For one brief moment, it gazes toward the Milky Way, toward Terra, toward the sons of the Emperor, and somewhere within the endless consciousness of the hive mind, something akin to recognition occurs. The prey is preparing. Fade to black. End of episode 5, The Last Primarch.